It's very unlikely that it's the case, but let's have a quick recap of the Tomb Raider series as if you're a complete newbie to it. You know, like you're from one of the lost tribes frequently depicted in the series, a stuck-out-of-time castaway who has somehow gone a quarter of a century without hearing of electricity, video games, and the 17 adventures of Lara Croft, a heroine who changed the face of an industry. If you're squeamish, this is not your game. Ms. Croft dies in spectacularly violent ways sometimes. Even those of us desensitized by decades of video game violence will utter a "god damn" every once in a while. If you suffer from crippling vertigo, this also isn't your game. You'll be asked to make jumps so suicidal, they will make the leaps of faith in Assassin's Creed look like sensible life choices. If you think rare antiquities belong in a museum for the purposes of preservation, this is not your game, because our hero is like a bull in a china shop when it comes to respecting undiscovered wonders of the ancient world.
What? Abby said not to break anything.
If you're a member of PETA, this is definitely not your game. Lara Croft has flatlined more of God's miracles than tapeworms and ticks combined. But to be fair, most of them have her on the menu. Last of all, if you're frustrated by what I like to call boneheaded game logic, you know, sort of writing and mechanics that either feel cliche, lazy, or just deliberately obtuse because the designers want you to go a certain way rather than encourage you to be creative, then yeah, look, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is going to have you biting your controller a little bit. And don't get me wrong, all of this negativity is coming from a place of love, from someone who's lived and breathed this series for 25 years. Also, I just generally like to get the bad things out of the way to begin with. The fact remains, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is a sumptuous looking action adventure that I think is well worth your time, but it's also a slave to some of the dustiest, most played out tropes in our medium. For starters, there's that old suspension of disbelief that's required when you scramble up and through an impossibly complex tower of cogs and camshafts that must either be powered by magic or is an ancient perpetual motion machine. I mean, Lara herself even comments on the absurdity of these sights.
Still standing after centuries of earthquakes and storms.
I noticed some other little fourth wall breaking moments too, when Lara sort of wonders about the other oddities she has to put up with. Upon losing all of her gear, for example, everything bar her bow, in the second level of the game, which of course forces you to reacquire all her crap for the third time in this trilogy, Lara grumbles to herself,
Why didn't I pack all my equipment together?
and hey look, I thought being dialed back down to her castaway days of 2013's Tomb Raider was pretty novel, you know? I was all about it. But only the first time it happened in this game. Denying you your hard-earned and meticulously upgraded weapons in this adventure is a sadistic hobby of Eidos Montreal's. When I was hit with a complete arsenal reset for the second time in this game, right back down to nothing but my knife and harsh language, I pretty much groaned at my TV in disbelief. So yeah, word to the wise, stock up big on your bow. It's gonna be your best friend. And there's an insult to that injury. Between these 2 points in the story, Lara sort of arbitrarily takes it upon herself to go native with the local Peruvians by shelving her guns. Not because she's ever asked to, but because I honestly don't know. Self-protection with the most efficient tools available just doesn't feel fashionable all of a sudden. I mean, I actually laughed when there was a tragic but utterly preventable death of a character due to a villain packing, you guessed it, a firearm. And this all happened because Lara was stuck in her tribal phase, and I was robbed of player agency for no good reason. And of course, the second that happens, she goes back to guns blazing again. Doesn't make any sense. And look, one last thing before we pack up all the negatives. The game logic ratchets to absurd levels later on. I mean, for a good 20 minutes, I had to slice my way through a dozen heavily armed mercs using nothing but stealth and a sharp bit of metal. Which isn't a difficult prospect when you can effectively lure in and daisy chain kill a bunch of enemies into being murdered on the exact same corner. But every once in a while I could down someone who was packing heat of some description. Hell, some dudes wearing flak jackets, thermal goggles and state-of-the-art assault rifles. Could I scoop any of these up? Nope. It's kind of ridiculous. Okay, those are the bad things out of the way. For the overwhelming most part, Shadow stands as a great entry in a reboot trilogy that's been a breath of fresh air for this long-running franchise. First of all, I love the South American setting. There's something so quintessentially Tomb Raider about lurking through deep dark jungles and the remnants of BC civilizations. And you could easily lay a charge of cliche against this, what with riddles within riddles, hidden cities within hidden cities, and that shadowy, ominous chestnut that is guardians, either of subhuman or supernatural origin, stalking you from afar. That said, I love this game because it's just OG Tomb Raiding. It's well worth strapping in for. Mostly because this game immerses you in no time, thanks to an absolutely gorgeous engine, not to mention impeccably designed environments that are sumptuously lit and just brimming with fine detail. There were too many moments when I put myself in danger of being shot in the head or mauled just because I had to pause and drink in these worlds. I also lost way too much time slogging through Eidos's proprietary mud tech and marveling at the results. Speaking of, you can actually tactically smear this all over Lara, like Arnie out of Predator. It also probably has a lot of skincare benefits. Either way, super cool stuff. Other things that I liked included underwater stealth sections involving lethal moray eels and roving packs of piranhas, which was pretty intense because that's a childhood fear of mine. I also love that there's a lot more flexibility between stealth and guns blazing when you're on land. If one approach isn't working for you, you now have a better means to break contact, obscure line of sight, and adjust your approach in combat. In the old games, once the jig was up, the encounter pretty much had to be an assault until either you died or they did. Sometimes, your best bet is to redistribute Lara up into the canopy in order to re-engage with the Eagle Talon move. It's brutal, to say the least, an arrow-based version of Batman Arkham's gargoyle takedowns.
I still can't. Holy Christ! They're here! Where are you?
What are they so afraid of?
Oh, probably you? You bloody psycho? Speaking of high-flying antics, I have to report that the traversal has become a little ropey, and in an awesome way. You can rappel and wall run to your heart's content. I also got a kick of using high positions in the trees with fear arrows, a hallucinogen-based means to make one enemy go postal on his mates before committing suicide. Once again, this is pretty dark stuff for Lara, but hey, the warning was on the tin, folks. Shadow of the Tomb Raider. The fact of the matter is that Ms. Croft has now transitioned from naive survivor to hardened adventurer to, well, casual mass murderer whose obsession with the thrill of the hunt is becoming incredibly destructive to both herself and the entire world at large. The concept of taking things too far, and the price we ultimately pay for our fixations, is a fascinating direction for this character, and I'm glad Eidos decided to delve into the heretofore unexplored temple that is the soul of Lara Croft. You should go in expecting some high drama moments between an increasingly myopic Lara and her long-time lovable sidekick Jonah. And I appreciated that we're almost the villain in this game. Lara, being reckless and not leaving good enough alone, more or less tips the first domino in what could be the apocalypse.
You're lying.
Be that as it may, I loved playing this game. It's a wonderful romp, or, as they want to call it, a concluding chapter of the Origin trilogy. And I can't wait to take on more of the deadly obsession difficulty, a checkpointless madman of a thing where one screw up can cost you hours of work. I got through the opening level before shelving it for later on due to time constraints. However, my heart was in my throat the entire time I was playing it. Props to Eidos for also making every other difficulty below it extremely customizable. Also, anybody into tailoring stuff to their liking will love the slew of skins available that offer perk benefits beyond just the cosmetic. Even if you aren't into ludicrous challenges, I think there's a ton of other things to endear you to Shadow of the Tomb Raider. It's brimming with those big blockbuster moments of catastrophe that Eidos does so well, and the challenge terms are bigger and more deadlier than ever. You're looking at some of the best designed puzzles in the series entire. Eidos also manages to kick up the gore a notch, plus the combat and traversal have evolved in worthy new ways as well. This isn't perfect, but it's some master craftsmanship that will easily sate the needs of a 25-year die-hard fan like myself, whilst effortlessly reeling in a whole new generation of raiders.